I sold my soul to the devil. Katy Perry. They digest it on a lot of different levels. Some people will see it and be disgusted by it, but maybe they'll be unconsciously aroused by it. If people keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it, eventually it's not going to be such a strange thing. That's a quote by Madonna. Exposing the works of Satan, popular music. In his autobiography, The Dogfather, Snoop Dogg says the devil came to him to make a deal that he would be rich and famous in exchange for his soul. Snoop accepted the devil's offer, by his own words, and identifies that the point at which Calvin Broadus dies, Snoop Dogg was born. I met the spirit of music, an appearance of the devil in a Venice canal, running. I saw a Satan or a satyr moving beside me, a fleshly shadow of my secret mind. A quote by Jim Morrison. I was directed and commanded by another power, the power of darkness, that a lot of people don't believe exists, the power of the devil, Satan, by Little Richard. Welcome to Dawn's Diorama. This is Sunday 16th of June 2013, and tonight I'm really excited because I've got DJ Mark Devlin. He's a club and radio DJ, and he's on to expose Satanism within the music industry. Mark Devlin is as I said, he's widely successful with his radio and club DJing, not just within the UK but worldwide. He has a website at djmarkdevlin.blogspot.co.uk, and he also runs his own online music magazine, blacksheepmag.com. So, being a music industry insider, it puts him in the perfect position to expose this. So, it should be a good show. So, without further ado, let's expose what's going on. Let's go behind these curtains, wide open tonight. So welcome to the show, Mark. How you doing?
Hey, Dawn. I'm good. And just to point out, the name Devlin doesn't mean devil in. Just in case anyone was wondering. It's a name that was brought into the family by adoption. It doesn't go way back. So if anyone tries to read anything into it, don't go there.
Just to clarify, it's not, in this case, a conspiracy.
Exactly.
So, right, let's start at the very beginning, Mark. Let's go back to your talking about your background. Who are you? How did you get to this point? How did you get started? And how did you come to the realisation that something was not quite right within the music industry?
Well, I've been a lifelong music fan. I got into it very young. I bought my first record when I was 5, which was Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. And throughout my childhood and teenage years, I was into basically whatever was in the charts, pop music generally. And I had this idea when I reached my teenage years that I'd like to be a DJ. That's the job that I really wanted to do because I was so enthusiastic about music. I just wanted to put it out there and try and have people sharing that enthusiasm with me. So I set my sights on becoming a DJ, a bit of hustling, few struggles, because these things are never easy, but I eventually got there in about 1990. So I've been doing my thing for the last 23 years. To cut a long story short, I've done various radio shows on different stations. I currently do one on a station in Oxford, which is where I live. And I've been fortunate enough to DJ up and down the UK and in about 40 odd countries around the world. So had a good time, had a good innings. If the career flops tomorrow, then it's been fun. And I got involved, when I became a DJ, I got involved with what you would loosely term black music in all its forms. And that was mainly hip-hop, but it also included soul, funk, R&B, reggae dancehall, soulful house, that sort of thing. But hip-hop has pretty much been the foundation. And the golden years of hip-hop, as any purist will tell you, were pretty much the 1990s or the late 80s to the mid-90s. That's when all the classic material came out. That's when the art form was really at its peak. And in my view, things started to degenerate in terms of hip-hop output from probably 1997 onwards. but noticeably through the 2000s. So from 2000, as the millennium progressed, in my view, there were some very clear changes taking place in the sort of lyrics that you were getting in hip-hop, and the sort of imagery that was going into videos, and the sort of artists that were getting to the top of the tree. And this progressed, and it got to the point in 2008 where the sort of artists that were coming through and the sort of production methods that were being used in so-called hip-hop was so different to what had gone before that I started asking some questions about what was going on, because it seemed to me like there was an agenda starting to be put into place. And this kind of coincided with a personal conscious awakening, as I call it, which started for me around about 2008 and reached its culmination in 2010, which is when I would say I woke up, to coin a phrase, and that's when I came to a realisation that actually the world and reality and life is nothing like we've been conditioned and programmed all our lives to believe that it is. And the big picture shows you that there are some individuals controlling every aspect of daily life, human affairs, from behind the shadows that we're not supposed to know about, that are pulling the strings of those that we see in the public eye. So politicians and corporate bosses and musicians and Hollywood actors and all the rest of it.
Just sorry to interrupt your stream of thought there, but just before we go any deeper into this, I'd like to ask you what made you take the plunge to expose your findings when many others in your position don't?
Well, I can fully understand why others don't want to go there and don't want to go public with all this stuff. I do have a lot of conversations on a non-public basis, Facebook chat or email or face-to-face conversations with many other DJs and many other music heads who can kind of see the sort of stuff that I'm talking about and are in agreement with me on a lot of it, but they don't want to go public with it because they're worried about how it's going to affect their careers and what people are going to think of them and what consequences it might hold. And I reached the stage after looking into this for quite a long time and placing it into the wider context of, as I was saying, what's really going on in the world and what life and reality really is. And I reached the decision that I need to be talking out about this because somebody needs to be putting it out there. Why should it be somebody else? You know, I've taken that responsibility on myself because you can't decide that somebody else has to do this if you've realised what's going on. You take that responsibility yourself and you just say what needs to be said. And I've reached a point where I've let go of the fear of what people might think of what I say. Don't give a damn what people might think. I just put out information that I believe needs to be out there, and people can make of it what they will, and I'm happy to do that. Others must decide whether they choose to go down that route themselves. That's their decision, and I can only speak for myself, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's admirable, but obviously, I mean, I think that, you know, hopefully this will inspire others. You know, hearing you coming out and speaking about it in your position, but others in similar positions, hopefully it will inspire some more people to come out and do the same thing.
Well, I hope that it will, and already it has. Already there's been evidence of, as a result of the sort of stuff that I've been speaking about, really for the last 3 years now. It's quite a recent thing for me, since about 2010. And I trod very carefully to start with. I was a bit cautious about how much I wanted to say and how to say it. But as time has gone on, I've become so... Well, the sort of stuff that I'm talking about has been validated in so many ways. In the early days, I kind of had a few doubts, and I was thinking, you know, have I got this right? Is this correct? Is this stuff really going on in music? But all along, there has been validation of all this stuff, and there's been confirmation that, yes, actually I'm on absolutely the right track with it, and there are many other researchers talking about it, not in the UK, but mainly in the US, and there's lots of information out there to back it all up, and I seemingly have inspired a few other people to take an interest in this from feedback that I've got. But the other thing is, you never really know what people are making of the information you put out there. It could be having a very positive effect, and you don't necessarily get to know about that. You just hope that it is, and all you can really do is put it out there and let the universe take its course.
I've been particularly interested in this for a few years. I mean, I've felt for a long time that something is not quite right. And then I did watch this series about the music industry exposed, I think it was called. I think it's Farhan K that made it.
On YouTube, yeah?
Yes, on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it goes into like all the different celebrities, artists like Rihanna and whatnot, and all the subliminal messages and going on. Now, I found most mainstream songs appear to be geared towards sex, drugs, girls, consumerism, and this may have always been the case, but it seems more blatant nowadays, especially the latter, and less thought-provoking. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's an agenda that's being played out, definitely. And one thing I do want to make clear, just from the outset, is that when I'm talking about Satanism, to use that phrase, and all this kind of dark stuff that's going into music, I'm not coming at this from any kind of religious angle. You know, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Buddhist, anything like that. I don't adhere to any organised religion. I'm not trying to sound like a sort of fire and brimstone preacher in the pulpit. Sometimes probably some of the stuff that I talk about can make it sound as if that's my stance, but it's not. It's a non-religious stance. I'm all about truth and consciousness. And that's the era that we're living in now. So many people are waking up to these great truths about who we really are, what we're doing here, where here is, what life is all about, and what human consciousness is. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming at all this from. And also, when it comes to the term Satanism, which I know we're going to refer to, I don't personally take that to mean belief in a demonic entity known as the devil. So I don't take the biblical kind of interpretation of Satanism. Satanism to me is all about bad energy, negative energy, because everything is made up of energy. Everything in existence is energy resonating and vibrating at different frequencies. And when you have low frequency energy, it's very bad, it's very negative, and there are lots of kind of scenarios that can reside within that domain. And there are also entities, non-human, off-world, interdimensional entities that reside within negative frequency ranges. So in my view, what's happening with particularly the sort of music that's being put out now, although it goes way back, is all about summoning up and conjuring up and residing within bad, negative energy frequency ranges. So that's kind of my disclaimer, really, at the start of it all. But It does go way back. There's the story of Robert Johnson, the blues singer, making a deal with the devil. And it's a famous story, which a lot of people take to be a metaphor. But I would suggest that maybe it's not a metaphor. The story is that in exchange for fame and fortune and great musical gifts, becoming a fantastic musician, Robert Johnson made a deal with the devil. And it's this kind of mythical story that gets banded around the music industry. And at the start of the show, you gave a lot of other examples of people that have talked about this type of thing. And going way back, you've got stories of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in the 60s, dabbling with the dark stuff. And you've got the Rolling Stones track Sympathy for the Devil. You've got the Beatles track Helter Skelter, which is said to have inspired the Charles Manson family murders of Sharon Tate and others in 1969. Apparently they were all listening to Helter Skelter by the Beatles and reading all kinds of subliminal messaging into the lyrics. So this stuff was very much in the public domain and in the music headlines in the 60s. You've then got the influence of Aleister Crowley, the infamous Satanist.
Oh, of course, yeah.
The Beast, the 20th century's most famous Satanist, self-styled, who is something of a celebrity within the music world. And why the hell would that be, you might ask? But Crowley pops up everywhere. He's on the sleeve of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin was obsessed with Aleister Crowley, and he bought his house, Boleskine House, on the shores of Loch Ness, where all kinds of seances and dark stuff went on, all kinds of strange stuff. We hear that David Bowie was hugely influenced by Crowley, Elton John as well, and so many others.
A lot of the prominent ones.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the 60s and 70s. Then you get into the issue of backmasking, subliminal messages, which are supposedly encoded into a lot of rock records. The famous example is Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, which apparently if you play it backwards, which I've done, you hear various references to Satan, my sweet Satan, and all this sort of thing. And I've got to say, having reversed the track and listened to it myself, it does sound pretty plausible. You approach these things with an open mind, but it does sound to me like there's something going on there. So you got all of that. And there was a famous case in 1990 involving Judas Priest, the group Judas Priest, who were taken to court by the families of two teenagers who had committed suicide, allegedly as a result of hearing subliminal messages in a Judas Priest track when played backwards. I don't know why they were playing the track backwards, but apparently there were messages. There was a message saying "Do it, do it," and this was actually played in the court case to try and prove the prosecution's point. And the allegation was that this had caused these two teenagers to go out and take their own lives. So all this dark, strange, demonic sort of stuff has been going on a long time. And what I've noticed in the what's laughingly referred to as hip-hop is that it's kind of a modern interpretation and a modern manifestation of something that's been going on for a very long time. So all this stuff we're seeing in music videos now, all the stuff we're hearing in lyrics, the kind of artists and the images that they have, is the contemporary way of continuing an agenda that's been going on for a very long time. Because it would appear to be the case that the music industry is, and probably always has been, run by some very dark, very sick people, as are all other aspects of daily human life, sadly. I know that's inconvenient. I'd prefer it wasn't the case, but inconvenient as it may be, it is true.
Now, there is plenty of examples, obviously, that we can get into of artists that, mainstream artists that are maybe a bit mind controlled or whatever, but we can go into that in a minute. But what about the artists that are bucking this trend and actually putting out some really good quality music, and they're not losing the intellect from their music, who are actually actively going against this and trying to, they're lucky enough to have the success. Well, I suppose it's more that it's not just luck. I mean, they've got the talent as well, but obviously it does take some luck as well, I think, with the way the whole music industry is set up, because it's not really favourable to people who have real, genuine talent all the time.
Yeah, well, there certainly are a number of artists out there making positive...
Yeah, if they go against what the mainstream music wants them to do, if they're actually trying to buck the trend and expose things, then they're going to come up against some brick walls. What do you think about that?
Well, sadly, there are consequences for artists that tend to do that, and we've seen some examples recently. Michael Jackson, of course, is a good one. We hear that just before the series of shows that he was due to do in Wembley, he was planning to publicly expose some of the workings of the industry, and particularly Sony, which is a label name that you hear cropping up time and time again when it comes to the manipulation of artists and all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And of course, Michael Jackson didn't last long after that story emerged. Another more recent example from an artist who was also part of Sony is Lauryn Hill, formerly of the Fugees, who, as people have probably heard, was recently hit with a huge tax bill of nearly $1 million. And she said that one of the reasons why she'd not paid this tax bill is because her family had been getting threats. She didn't go into any detail, but she suggested that she'd been receiving threats from persons unknown, and that she'd been through a whole load of turmoil as a result. And it turned out that the only way she was able to pay back this huge tax bill that she owed was to sign again a new contract with the record label that she successfully split from many years earlier, which is Sony, Columbia. And so that is her only way of paying back this tax bill. And, this tax thing, smacks of a stitch-up to me. It pretty much seems like she's being made an example of, because she's been very vocal about the workings of the industry before as well, and she's tried to expose some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And so it seems there are consequences for artists that step up and try and do this, which is why so few of them do. But the other thing is, as you mentioned, there are of course artists that are maintaining their integrity, and they are continuing to make positive, empowering, uplifting music. Unfortunately, it's not the sort of thing that you get to hear in the charts. It's not the sort of thing that makes MTV playlists and daytime radio rotation.
There was some exceptions in the past, like for example Tupac.
Well, in the past, certainly there was. I mean, Bob Marley had a whole career of making great music, meaningful music, and John Lennon as well. But we're going back a long way with these artists.
Yeah.
Within hip-hop circles, I'm thinking of acts like Public Enemy and Dead Prez, who make great music and have never really sold out. And also you've got artists like Immortal Technique and Low Key out of the UK, who are known for making music with a message that's positive and that talks about meaningful things that people need to pay attention to. So those artists are out there, but it seems to me that the industry has reached a stage where if you're going to become one of the A-listers at the very top of the game, that is getting all the video plays and is getting all the big shows and is getting played on the radio all the time, you've got to be a manipulated stooge, a puppet of the industry. And that's what we're seeing with pretty much all the artists within the so-called hip-hop, R&B and pop music fields right now. You cannot be successful within those genres unless you've allowed yourself to be completely manipulated and controlled by the industry that spawned you, and you've effectively sold your soul to them, so to speak.
Yeah, and despite obviously the fact that there is so many these artists that have sold out, and and the music is very bland, there is thankfully still some bands that have bucked the trend and carry on being successful in spite of all this. Now, many mainstream artists, they cover up one eye when they're being photographed, and sometimes in videos as well. Sometimes they're posed making a triangle over one of their eyes, or covering one eye with their hand or their hair, for example. What's the reason behind this? What does this all symbolise? And where's it all originating from, for those who aren't really aware about the symbolism as well?
Well, this is one of the first things that alerted me to the fact that something was going on back in about 2008. Which is pretty much when this modern trend started. You started to see so many of the A-list artists, Jay-Z, Rihanna, Beyonce, Britney Spears, Katy Perry, the list goes on, Kanye West, doing this thing, as you say, covering one eye. And you saw it on record sleeves, in promotional pictures, and most importantly in music videos. And so I started to ask why this was happening. And the cover story, because there always is one, is that, they're just trying to be cool, they're trying to look fashionable, it's just a way of looking slick. But you reach a point where it goes on for so long, and there are so many artists doing it, that it goes beyond the realms of just trying to look cool. There's many ways to look cool, so why are they always covering one eye? And so I started to research into it. And as I said earlier, this coincided with a point in my life where I was looking into many other subject areas about truth, consciousness, reality, conspiracy, and all of this. And it turns out that the covering of one eye is an occult reference to the so-called all-seeing eye, which, if you get a US dollar bill and look on the back, you see a pyramid with the capstone removed and an eye in the pyramid, and Latin phrases around it. One of them translates roughly into New World Order. And it's kind of the calling card of the secret societies that are pulling the strings and manipulating all aspects of human affairs from behind the shadows that we're not supposed to know about, but which so many people quite patently now do, because so many are waking up to the truth of what's going on. So they're sometimes referred to as the Illuminati, but that's a convenient kind of catch-all phrase for these individuals operating within secret societies that are controlling governments, corporation, the mainstream media, the military, the scientific establishment, the educational establishment and the entertainment industry, Hollywood movies and the music industry. Ultimately, they're all controlled by the same top of the pyramid, the same individuals and secret societies at the top of the power structure. And so when they get their artists to cover one eye, they're on one level letting you know who owns them, and they're subliminally implanting into your mind the idea that they're in control and that they're running every aspect of the show. And also on an energetic level, because again, everything is energy vibrating at different frequencies. Things that are apparently solid mass are actually still energy, just vibrating at a very low frequency. And so you can actually have an energetic effect on your surroundings depending on the will and the intent that is charged into particular symbols. And so if you have a pyramid, or if you have an all-seeing eye, or any other kind of image that you might choose, and it's charged with very malevolent kind of bad energy by the creator of that symbol, then wherever that symbol is picked up and interpreted by others, it's going to carry that energy with it, and it's going to carry that malevolent force with it if that's the energy with which it's being created. So it's having a very negative and harmful subliminal effect on the observer without them even realizing what's going on, because it goes straight into the subliminal subconscious mind. And the language the language of the subconscious mind is symbols. It interprets symbols in a far more potent way than it interprets words or anything else. And there's a phrase by an American researcher called Jay Widener, and he says, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a symbol is worth 1,000 pictures. And so these individuals recognize the power of symbols, and that's why they've started encoding and incorporating them into music videos. And so when you have artists like Jay-Z and Beyonce and Rihanna and Kanye and all the others doing all this stuff, they're absolutely not in any kind of creative control of what they're doing at all.
Which is what I was coming to. I was going to ask you about this next part. Now, Fritz, I know you mentioned about a book, but I was aware of it. It's a really good book, the Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler book about MK Ultra, the CIA's monarch mind control problem. Program, I should say. And now, there's a lot of evidence to suggest it's been used on much of the mainstream artists in order for them to program the masses. Do you think this is true? What would you add to this? And could you explain for the listeners what this is, what this monarch mind control program is?
Well, it's absolutely real, MK Ultra. It's beyond the realms of what you might call conspiracy theory. It's in the public domain. You know, there are documents and records proving the fact that this program exists. There's the Fritz Springmeier book, which is an excellent reference point, as you just mentioned. And there are all kinds of insiders and whistleblowers and people that have actually been subjected to MK Ultra that have lived to tell the tale. So it's very real, and it's something that was developed many decades ago. The story goes that it was developed in Nazi Germany, in the concentration camps, which is where the methods were perfected, if you can call it that. And at the end of the Second World War, many of these Nazi scientists that had been working on these programs were secretly taken to the United States to continue working on these programs for the US government and various factions of it, and the early version of the CIA. And it's mind control. MK means mind control in the German, and MK Ultra is one branch of it. Monarch programming is another, and it's very sinister, very dark, very depraved. It involves subjecting the person to horrendous levels of trauma, and this could involve them witnessing a murder, being sexually abused, electroshock, mind-altering drugs. There are all kinds of ways in which they trigger the trauma, and they've worked out that the human mind, when exposed to horrendous levels of trauma, tends to shatter into different compartments, different dissociative identities, and so each one of these segments of the mind has its own identity and can be programmed independently of all the others. And you've seen this in a lot of Hollywood movies. There was one recently called Identity just a few years ago, which deals with this, because they encode all this stuff into Hollywood movies to let you know what's going on. And so anyone that kind of tries to claim this stuff is real, a good way of discrediting them is to say, oh, you've been watching too many Hollywood movies, you need to get out more. But yeah, you have these dissociative identities, and they can then be programmed in different ways. And so this is the way they create mind-controlled assassins. Good example would be Mark Chapman, the guy that shot John Lennon, who obviously was programmed with the mission to, at all costs, shoot Lennon. But he was clearly then programmed to forget what he had done, because the story goes that when the cops arrived, the guy was just stood there calmly reading a copy of Catcher in the Rye and with no recollection of what he'd just done. Sirhan Sirhan is another great example, the guy that shot Bobby Kennedy. To this day, he's been in jail for 40-odd years, and he just claims that he can't remember a goddamn thing about it because he's an MKUltra subject. And so in recent times, they've started using this technology on music artists, and there's a lot of evidence that this is the case. And as I said, this power structure, these power elites as they see themselves, do tend to like to announce what they're doing by encoding it, sometimes subtly and sometimes not so subtly, into things like Hollywood movies, TV shows and music videos. And when you watch a lot of music videos from the last few years, I would suggest from around about 2008 onwards, you see all these visual symbols which represent MKUltra mind control and Monarch programming. Anything involving dolls or mannequins with broken, amputated limbs is a sign of MKUltra mind control. How many videos have we seen this in? Anything involving a shattered mirror, anything involving pink hair, which sounds crazy, but you see a lot of Barbie doll type looking characters with pink hair, Nicki Minaj being a classic example. Her nickname is even Barbie. And the idea here with the dolls is it's the shattering of innocence as represented by childhood. And, you know, a childhood doll is something that's seen as very pure and very innocent. And when you kind of twist that doll and break off its arms and, you know, do all these dark things to it, it symbolises what mind control is doing to the subject, and the loss of innocence there, and the loss of their personal identity. And we've seen lots of examples of this in music videos. Katy Perry videos are full of it. When it comes to Monarch programming, which is a division of MKUltra, the symbol there is the Monarch butterfly, this very distinctive sort of orange and black coloured butterfly. And you see butterflies of this variety in so many music videos. Mariah Carey released an album called Butterfly a few years ago, and it's got Monarch butterflies all over the sleeve. And it's all symbolising mind control. And what they're doing with a lot of these videos is announcing the fact that these artists are not in control of their own minds, literally. Because when you've got an artist whose different identities can be programmed according to your will, it's that much easier to control the game and to have a certain effect on people that are listening to the music and looking up to and lapping up all these artists, than if you've got artists that are in control of their own minds with their own creative thoughts and their own artistic expressions. They don't want artists that express themselves creatively. They might have allowed it in the past, but it's not happening anymore. Look at Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is the classic example.
It's all very kind of robotic now, isn't it? It's like the dance moves are all dancing the same, like robots. The humans have got robotic presence about them, and it's like, I mean, it connects, as you said. It's not just in the music industry, and it's in the movies as well, with the Terminator, for example, the transhumanist agenda and everything. Like the robot, as I said, the robots have got human emotions, and the humans are like robots, behaving like robots. Yeah,
it's the transhumanist agenda, as you've said. Transhumanism is the merging of humanity with technology, machines. And this has been the dream of this power elite for a very long time. What they want is to have a society which is full of transhumans, basically, who are not fully human, who are cut off and detached from their spirituality, their true nature as an expression of consciousness, as an expression of universal energy, of everything there is. They want them to be controlled by technology instead. And that's why we've seen this incredible, relentless march of technology in so many areas of our lives in recent years. You go back 20 years and virtually nobody had a mobile phone. You certainly didn't have to scan all your groceries yourself in Tesco and have machines barking orders at you. You could phone up a company and speak to a human being instead of having to go through a bloody robot as you do now. And now everything is controlled by computers, everything is controlled by technology. You want to drive from point A to point B, most people just turn on the sat-nav. In the old days you pick up a map and read it yourself. And none of this is by accident. It's all because they want a society that is completely dependent on technology and machinery, and ultimately what they want is a microchipped population. They want individuals to have microchips inserted into them, which will connect them to a giant computer grid, which will in turn control every aspect of their lives, from when they try and make a financial transaction to identifying all their personal details and their blood type and all their medical details, and even to be able to transmit signals remotely through these microchips to make people feel and think a certain way. The ultimate mind control. Something they've been working on for a very long time. A lot of people are coming round to accepting this fact now. It sounds fantastic when you first hear of it, and it sounds the stuff of Hollywood movies, but it's very real. And there are lots of authors and lots of researchers that have looked into this. There are lots of different sources, all validating each other and backing up the fact that this is really going on. And all aspects of society play their role in it. And so when it comes to music videos, they're normalising the idea of a transhumanist society by getting all these artists to dress up as robots and dance like robots in their videos, as you said. will.i.am is a great example, who once upon a time was a half-decent artist when the Black Eyed Peas first started out, actually made half-decent music before he quite clearly got recruited and was required to step up and make his contribution to the industry machine. And now he's really pushing this transhumanist agenda. He's always appearing as a robot, and Black Eyed Peas records sound very electronic and very artificial. And they're normalising this in the eyes and the minds of an entire young generation, so that their idea of life and society and humanity is dictated by this transhumanist agenda with an absolute reverence for technology. Technology is not always your friend, people. It can be used for very malevolent means, and we're seeing lots of aspects of that in what's happening in the world now. Who can look at where society is right now compared to 10 or 20 years ago and think that we're heading to a good place? We're really not, and we're seeing clues as to what they're trying to do in music videos and Hollywood films. They're letting you know. They're doing it subliminally, but they like to announce it that way. And also they feel that by announcing these things, by encoding it visually into videos and films, they're helping to empower it to come into place. Because this goes back to the law of attraction and the law of cause and effect, which is another thing that a lot of people are coming to recognise and understand now. Every action has a reaction. Energy that you put out there into the universe comes back at you, and if you wish and will for something to come into place, if you put the correct energy out there, you can actually help that thing to manifest into reality. And anyone can do it as long as they know what they're doing, and these individuals clearly do. And so by visually depicting something in a music video, they believe that they can help it to actually become a reality. And that's the sort of society that we're headed for if we don't all wake up and realise what's going on and head it off. And that's what we need to do.
That's a very thorough answer, thank you. Now, I want to go back to the whole monarch issue, the monarch programming. Now, how do we spot the difference between an artist who's under this Monarch programming? Is there a way of identification here? Do they have a stamp or something on them? Or
well, it's nothing visual like that, but there's some clues with some of these artists, some very, very clear clues. And as I mentioned, Nicki Minaj is the ultimate example. You could have a field day looking at Nicki Minaj and examining her whole persona or personas, because she has plenty.
Is she on is it the X Factor? Because I don't really watch these
No, well, I don't.
Trashy programs.
I don't blame you. That's a good move. No, she's Nicki Minaj is allegedly a rapper. We're told.
Right.
I'd call her something different, but she is the most prominent female so-called rap artist of the moment. She's part of Lil Wayne's camp, Young Money, Cash Money Records, and that's a collective that consists of Lil Wayne, Drake, Nicki Minaj, Tyga, Big Sean, and a whole bunch of other artists that they're bringing through. And Nicki Minaj is a very prominent artist that a lot of the kids are getting down to. You hear her records in clubs all over the place. She's all over certain radio stations, and her music is absolute garbage. It bears absolutely no similarity to anything that went before it in terms of hip-hop. The sort of stuff she's talking about lyrically is degenerative, it's negative, it's not the sort of thing you want your teenage daughter listening to. It's, sexually explicit and just talking about negative stuff and nonsense and just brain-dead stuff, really, that is not going to do you any good at all. And Nicki Minaj is a very good example of a mind-controlled artist. You get the impression with her that they're not even trying to hide it. She's got these various personas and these various alter egos that she slips into, and she does it in interviews. She'll be in the middle of an interview. She's from New York. She's got a very broad, brash kind of New York accent, but she's got this alter ego which has a British voice, a very distinctive English voice, and she slips into it, and she'll start talking with an English accent very convincingly. And it's like she's switched personalities. She's become somebody else. Her nickname is Barbie. She's known as Barbie, and all her fans are known as Barbs. Girls that love Nicki Minaj are called Barbs. Where's all my Barbs at, she says. And they're not even trying to hide that, because the doll thing, the whole Barbie doll thing, is symbolic of MK Ultra mind control. And one of her alter egos is called Roman Zelensky, which is obviously a reference to Roman Polanski, the filmmaker. And this is the guy that did the movie Rosemary's Baby in 1968, which is a very revealing film, allegedly fiction, but I would suggest far more fact in terms of how it exposes what goes on behind the scenes in the entertainment industry. And it talks about satanic rings, satanic cults, and a lot of that is very, very real. Roman Polanski was the guy that brought that to film. Roman Polanski is the guy whose wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered by the Manson family in those 1969 murders in California while she was pregnant. And many believe that was Roman Polanski's sacrifice to the industry and his way of stepping up in the game and being elevated to higher levels within the entertainment business, because many researchers will tell you that a sacrifice, an actual blood sacrifice of somebody close to you, is required of you if you're going to move up to the upper levels of the industry. Again, I know it sounds fantastic, I know it sounds outrageous the first time you come across it, but you would be surprised at the number of authors and researchers and the amount of work that's been done into this to suggest that it is actually the case. So yeah, going back, that's Roman Polanski, aka Roman Zolansky, which is one of Nicki Minaj's alter egos. So it's easier to spot with some artists than others. Nicki Minaj is a dead giveaway. And then there are others, such as Mariah Carey. Now, I don't know if she's undergone mind control, but it wouldn't surprise me, because you got the album Butterfly, which came out with the monarch butterflies all over it. I remember there was a story a few years ago of Mariah Carey attempting suicide. I think we're going way back to the 90s here.
Yeah.
But she apparently went off the rails a bit, and we're told that she attempted to commit suicide, and then you hear that she'd kind of gone to counselling or whatever, and then a few weeks later it's announced that the old Mariah is back. She's back to normal, she's okay now, nothing to worry about, folks. Which would be reprogramming. That would be the programming wearing off.
So very sinister.
And then going back to the lab to get the programming topped up. And Britney Spears is another great example. You know, Britney Spears, a few years ago, going a bit mad, shaving her hair off, attacking cars with umbrellas. Again, Britney then goes away and comes back a short while later with her hair grown back, and we're told it's okay, the old Britney is back, no need for alarm, here she is, business as usual. Reprogramming. Sometimes the MK Ultra programming wears off and it needs to be topped up, and we see examples of that. Absolutely fantastic, I know, but unfortunately it would appear to be true.
Madonna's another example, isn't she? I mean, she's done a lot of things, especially a lot of her live performances have things like pyramid, like Freemasonry symbolism, like the pillars, the checkered floors, the pyramids, as I said, and all sorts of... even in our video Frozen, I'm sure she's like shape-shifting.
Yep. In many ways,
shapeshifts into a dog.
Yeah, how appropriate. In many ways, Madonna is seen as the high priestess of the industry. And at the Super Bowl show, the US Super Bowl show last year, 2012, the halftime show, she was very prominent in that. She appeared as some kind of priestess of some cult, and that show was absolutely steeped in occult, satanic imagery of every variety you can imagine, and there were other artists involved in that as well. Nicki Minaj was dressed up as a sort of Catholic priest, CeeLo Green was involved in that one, and MIA, and there was the incident a few years ago where Madonna kissed Britney Spears live on stage, and of course that caused outrage, but it got so many people watching it and focusing attention on it, and that would appear to be some sort of occult ritual. Madonna is very much entrenched in the industry, has been for many years, and is in a very senior position now because she's served the system for so long. But in all these cases, you just get the impression that these artists have literally sold their souls, and they're just not in control of their own lives anymore. And what might at first appear to be a very attractive prospect, fame and fortune and riches beyond your wildest dreams, I'm sure it becomes clear to a lot of these artists after not very long that they've got themselves into something terrible, and there is no way out. You can't say no. You can't go back to your old life. You're in it for good. And we're seeing that now in the hip-hop scene with artists like Jay-Z and Kanye West. You know, I wanted to get into Kanye West because it's quite topical, because this weekend Kanye West dropped his new album, and it's called Yeezus. And it's a play on his nickname, which is Yeezy, Kanyeezy. You know, he's called it Yeezus. It's just a wordplay thing. But, my God, Kanye's last album was called My Dark Twisted Fantasy. And dark and twisted doesn't even start to do this one justice. And Kanye West claims to be a Christian. You know, he came out a few years ago with Jesus Walks, and he was talking about he's a Christian. And listening to this album, if Kanye West is a Christian, then I'm Mother Teresa of Calcutta. This is the darkest, most twisted, discordant album I've ever heard, I think. It's just a mishmash and a horrific sort of melting pot of really dissonant, horrible, grating electronic noises and really dark lyrical themes and all this other stuff going on. There's one track where he actually says the words, "They say I'm possessed, that's the omen." And elsewhere in the track he starts crying like a sort of raven or a crow, making the noise of a crow. There's another track where he says, "So scared of my demons, I go to sleep with a nightlight on the track I'm On It." And then you've got sounds like somebody in a mental institution in a straitjacket sort of screaming to get out, and sounds that are like a sort of torture chamber, a dungeon straight out of the movie Saw or something like that. And Kanye West didn't start out like this. You know, he started out as a producer, making tracks for the likes of Jay-Z, before he came out as a rapper in his own right. And his first album, The College Dropout, was an industry classic. Incredible lyrics, really creative music, very different to anything else out there. And over the years, you've just seen Kanye sort of degenerate into this horrible, nasty mess that he now is. And to me, it really smacks of, you sign on the dotted line for the industry, and you start getting all the fame and fortune and all the great things that you were promised. And they allow you to sort of continue in your own way, being reasonably creative yourself for the first few years.
Yeah, they tease you. They tease you with, that your life's going to be so fantastic and everything.
Yeah. And then there comes a point where you're required to step up. And that's where you really have to start doing some work for the system that spawned you. And Kanye's a great example of that, because a few years ago his music started to change, and it started to get very dark, and he started just talking about nothing, just stuff that doesn't matter. There's no message in his music at all. And now he's coming out with all this really dark kind of satanic stuff. Which
and it's just corrupting the fans, the listeners. They're just not everybody, obviously. Some people aren't so susceptible to the brainwashing, the programming.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is unfortunately a lot of people that are being taken in by this.
Well, what you've got is an entire generation of young people now who, if they're sort of 17, 18, 19 years of age, and they're just starting to take an interest in music and going out clubbing, listening to the radio, watching videos on the box, they don't have anything to compare it to. You know, somebody like me, I can remember better days. I can go back 20 years and say and tell you that music didn't used to be like this. But you know, kids now, young people are listening to this sort of stuff from Kanye and Jay-Z and whoever else, and they think, well, this is where it's at. This is what it is. This is music. This is youth culture. This is the sort of stuff I need to be listening to. This is what life's about. And they're having their whole self-identity and their whole perception of the world and what's important in life dictated to them by this really dark, harmful, sinister stuff. And not by accident, because, like I said, the forces that control the music industry are operating to an agenda, and it works in line with all these other areas of society where they're trying to mind control the masses, brainwash them, make them feel a certain way, and cut them off from their spirituality and their true nature.
And I've just looked at the time, and hours went so fast.
Yeah, doesn't it fly?
But we still have a couple of minutes left. I did want to just throw in there about the lady in red as well, because we hadn't covered that yet. Just if you could just very quickly cover that, and then maybe just give us some final words, and maybe you could even talk about, you were at Bilderberg Fringe Festival recently. You could maybe even talk a little bit about that for a couple of minutes as well, if you want.
Yeah, okay. What did you mean by the lady in red stuff?
The lady in red, like in the Matrix, there's the lady, they wear red, and they're kind of she's basically teasing. It's kind of satanic. It's more satanic kind of messages, subliminal messages with the woman wearing the red, and she's teasing the men, and it's basically selling sex.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of truth in the Matrix, actually. Again, you mention that to people and they think, oh god, you need to get a life, mate, you know, you've been watching too many films. But that's one of the reasons why they do it. There's a lot of truth in the Matrix, there's a lot of very potent symbology, and there's a lot of things that can be applied to the reality that we're living in. But really, I just wanted to finish up with some positive solutions, because we could talk about all this negative stuff and what's being done to us all day. And if that's all we do, then they've kind of won, because we're just acknowledging the fact that they're controlling us and we're not doing anything about it. And so I always try and offer solutions to people, because one of the things that I'm always asked is all very well exposing what's going on, all this dark stuff, but what can we do about it? And one of the things that you can do is just very simple. It's just don't engage with it. Do not associate with this stuff. If you recognise that the music that's being put out now and the artists that are creating it are not on your side and don't have your best interests at heart, don't listen to the music. Don't listen to radio shows that play it. Don't watch the videos. Just don't support the artists. You can be discerning. The power is with the consumer. You can seek out real music. It's still being made. Of course, it's not the stuff that you get to see on the surface, but if you dig deep a bit, you can find lots of artists out there that are making great music that makes you feel good, because a lot of it is to do with frequencies, sound frequencies, the frequencies at which music is recorded. It's been proven in endless studies that it can actually affect the way you feel. It can affect your moods. It can affect the way that you spend the rest of your day just listening to a particular piece of music that's being recorded at a particular frequency. Sound is very, very powerful energetically. So look for the good stuff and avoid the stuff that makes you feel bad, that doesn't sound right, doesn't sit right with you. And don't resonate fear or any of its low frequency derivatives. The key is fear has many different spin-offs, anger, frustration, jealousy, guilt, all this sort of stuff. It all derives from fear, and fear is a very low energy vibration that is not good for you and is not a good place to be. Positive vibrations can outweigh and overpower the negative stuff hundreds of thousands of times over, and we're very powerful if only we knew it in terms of the energy that we vibrate and resonate. So just don't associate with this music, look for better stuff, and don't let it get you under its grip, because if everybody was to do that, it would have no power at all, and that's what we need.
Excellent advice. Thanks very much, Mark, for coming on the show. It's been absolutely great having you.
It's gone quick, hasn't it?
It has. I've really enjoyed discussing this subject, and it's obviously something that really needs to get out there to spread that message wide. So, yeah, once again, thanks, and you're welcome to come back on the show in the future. We can discuss that off air sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. We got time for the Bilderberg stuff, or are we out of time now?
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but
okay.
We can always have you on again sometime to talk about that. You can come on a Dark City show, or you can come on mine at some point.
Yeah, it's all
but
good.
Again, we can discuss that all off air. So,
no problems.
We're going to move on now to the Dark City show is coming up next in the next hour. So until next week, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Over and out.